In 1776, the 13 American colonies declared independence from Britain, marking the beginning of a monumental struggle that would not only change the course of American history, but also influenced the world. The Declaration of Independence, primarily authored by Thomas Jefferson, boldly proclaimed the colonies' right to freedom, equality, and self-determination. It declared that governments derived their just powers from the consent of the governed, setting a revolutionary precedent. However, the lofty ideals expressed in the Declaration were just words on paper. The fledgling nation faced enormous challenges in turning those ideals into reality. At the time of independence, the United States was fragile. Its population was small, its economy primarily agrarian, and its military ill-prepared to face the might of the British Empire, one of the world's most powerful forces. The Revolutionary War was already underway, and each victory came at a tremendous cost in lives, resources, and morale. Ordinary people, farmers, blacksmiths, merchants, and laborers were suddenly called upon to fight, provide supplies, or support the war effort in countless ways. Some families had fathers, sons, and brothers fighting on distant battlefields, while women managed farms, businesses, and households in their absence, often taking on roles previously reserved for men. The struggle for independence was not uniform across the colonies. In New England, communities were tightly knit, and militias formed quickly to resist British forces. In the southern colonies, loyalties were divided, and neighboring families sometimes found themselves on opposite sides of the conflict. Native American nations faced their own difficult choices, as alliances with either the British or Americans could determine their survival. African Americans, enslaved and free, were also caught in the turmoil. Some were promised freedom if they fought for the British, while others joined American forces hoping to gain liberty. These stories illustrate that independence was not experienced equally by all, and the sacrifices were profound and deeply personal. Leaders of the new nation faced equally daunting challenges. Figures such as George Washington, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Alexander Hamilton worked tirelessly to unite a diverse population with different interests, religions, and regional identities. Washington's leadership as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army was instrumental in sustaining morale during difficult times, such as the brutal winter at Valley Forge in 1777 to 1778, where soldiers endured freezing temperatures, starvation, and disease yet remained steadfast. Franklin and Adams, meanwhile, traveled to Europe to secure critical diplomatic recognition and financial support, understanding that the war could not be won without international alliances. Beyond the battlefield, debates raged about the future of governance. How should the new nation be organized? How could power be distributed between state and federal authorities? The Articles of Confederation, ratified in 1781, attempted to address these questions but proved insufficient, as the central government lacked the ability to tax, regulate, trade, or enforce laws effectively. These early political struggles laid the groundwork for the later drafting of the United States Constitution in 1787, highlighting the constant tension between unity and independence, authority and liberty. Daily life in the colonies during this period was a mixture of hardship, innovation, and community effort. Families grew their own food, traded locally, and relied on neighborly cooperation to survive. Town meetings, religious gatherings, and local militias formed the backbone of civic engagement. Education, though limited, was highly valued in certain regions, particularly in New England, where children learned to read and write, often studying scripture alongside basic arithmetic and moral instruction. These early communities were incubators of the democratic ideals that would later flourish across the nation. Even in moments of doubt and danger, the belief in the possibility of a new kind of nation persisted. Writers, preachers, and local leaders spread ideas about freedom, natural rights, and the responsibilities of citizenship. Pamphlets, like Thomas Paine's Common Sense, inspired ordinary colonists to envision a future where they could govern themselves, free from tyranny. Everyday acts of courage, fighting in skirmishes, secretly storing weapons, or harboring spies demonstrated the depth of commitment to independence. By the end of the Revolutionary War in 1783, the United States had survived against overwhelming odds. Though small and economically challenged, it had achieved the extraordinary freedom from one of the most powerful empires of the time. The victory was not just military. It was a triumph of ideas, resilience, and the determination of a diverse population. It laid the foundation for the country's identity and nation, born from struggle, dedicated to the ideals of liberty, and willing to fight for them. The early years following independence were still filled with uncertainty. Leaders had to secure the nation's borders, stabilize the economy, and create a sense of shared national purpose among states with varying interests. The frontier beckoned, promising opportunity, but also demanding courage and resilience. Migration westward began, and conflicts with Native American nations intensified as settlers sought new lands. Trade agreements had to be negotiated with foreign powers, debts repaid, and internal divisions managed. Yet through these trials, the United States began to develop a culture of perseverance, innovation, and civic responsibility that would define its national character. By understanding the first 15 minutes of America's story, the birth of a nation amidst war, debate, sacrifice, and hope, we see the roots of its identity. Independence was not just a moment in time. It was a process, a struggle of ideas and human effort, where ordinary people and visionary leaders alike shaped a nation that aspired to influence the world. This foundation set the stage for future expansion, challenges, and the eventual transformation of the United States into a continental and then global power. By the early 1800s, the United States embraced the concept of manifest destiny, the belief that it was the nation's divine mission to expand across the North American continent. This idea became a guiding principle for politicians, settlers, and ordinary citizens alike, shaping decisions about land, migration, and foreign relations. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 was a transformative moment. The United States acquired more than 800,000 square miles of land from France, doubling its size almost overnight. The deal opened vast new territories for settlement, agriculture, and trade. Pioneers, traders, and explorers quickly moved westward, mapping rivers, valleys, and mountains, while encountering Native American nations who had lived on these lands for generations. By the late 19th century, the United States had grown into a continental power. Industrialization transformed cities, factories, and transportation networks, fueling economic growth and creating new opportunities for trade. American leaders began to look beyond the continent, seeking overseas markets, raw materials, and strategic locations to secure national interests. The idea that the United States should exert influence on a global scale was gaining traction among politicians, business leaders, and the public alike. Cuba, a Spanish colony, became a focal point of American attention. Sugar plantations were critical to the U.S. economy, and American investors had significant financial interests in Cuban agriculture. At the same time, reports of harsh Spanish repression against Cuban revolutionaries stirred public sympathy in the United States. Newspapers often sensationalists portrayed the suffering of Cuban civilians, creating a wave of popular support for intervention. This period gave rise to the term yellow journalism, where exaggerated reports influenced public opinion and helped push the country toward war. Although the cause of the explosion remains debated, the incident became a catalyst for war. Outraged Americans demanded action, and the U.S. government declared war on Spain in April 1898. The conflict was short, but decisive. American forces quickly defeated Spanish troops in the Caribbean and the Pacific, with battles fought on multiple fronts, including the Philippines and Puerto Rico. In the Philippines, American troops confronted Spanish forces in Manila. The conflict there was intense, with troops navigating unfamiliar terrain, tropical diseases, and resistance from both Spanish defenders and local populations. Meanwhile, in Cuba, American soldiers fought alongside Cuban insurgents, gaining experience in both conventional and guerrilla warfare. In Puerto Rico, U.S. forces landed with little resistance, but the strategic importance of the island was immediately recognized for trade and military purposes. The Treaty of Paris, signed in December 1898, formally ended the war and reshaped global power dynamics. The United States gained control of the Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Guam, while Cuba came under heavy influence through the Platt Amendment, which allowed the U.S. to intervene in Cuban affairs and maintain a naval base at Guantanamo Bay. For the first time, the United States was no longer just a continental power, had become a global empire, projecting military, economic, and political influence across oceans. This expansion marked a turning point in American history. Suddenly, the country had far-flung territories that required governance, defense, and integration into the global economy. Officials faced difficult questions. How could the U.S. govern populations with different languages, cultures, and political traditions? How should resources be managed and defended? These questions would dominate American foreign policy for decades. Beyond political and military considerations, the war and its aftermath had profound human consequences. In the Philippines, many civilians were caught in the crossfire, while Spanish and Filipino soldiers suffered heavy casualties. Puerto Ricans and Guamanians faced new governance systems, taxes, and military presence. Meanwhile, American soldiers experienced disease, tropical climate challenges, and the psychological toll of combat far from home. Personal letters, diaries, and newspaper reports from this time reveal fear, courage, and determination on all sides. Emphasizing the human dimension of empire, the Spanish-American War also transformed American society at home. The victory boosted national pride and strengthened the idea of the United States as a rising power. It sparked debates about imperialism. Some Americans argued that controlling foreign territories violated the nation's founding ideals of freedom and self-determination, while others believed that empire was necessary for security, trade, and global influence. This ideological struggle would shape U.S. politics for decades, influencing the treatment of new territories and the future conduct of foreign policy. The outcomes of this period set the stage for the Philippine-American War, the development of Puerto Rico under American administration, and strategic military planning in the Pacific, including Guam. By looking across the oceans, the United States entered a new phase of history. From a young nation focused on continental growth, it had become an emerging global power, navigating complex international dynamics, asserting authority over distant lands, and confronting the challenges of empire. The Philippines quickly became the most prominent and challenging U.S. colony following the Spanish-American War. They expected recognition of their sovereignty, only to face a new foreign ruler instead. This clash of expectations led almost immediately to the Philippine-American War, which lasted from 1899 to 1902, and claimed the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers and hundreds of thousands of civilians. Fighting took place in dense jungles, rural villages, and urban centers. American troops, trained in conventional European-style warfare, struggled against Filipino guerrilla tactics. Ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, and sabotage made the conflict prolonged and brutal. Both sides endured extreme conditions, heat disease, scarce food, and the ever-present threat of combat. Families were often caught in the crossfire, forced to flee their homes or provide support to one side or another. Diaries and letters from this period reveal fear, grief, and courage, highlighting the human cost of America's first overseas war. The United States sought to assert control, not only through military means, but also by implementing administrative and social reforms. New governance systems were introduced, establishing local municipalities and central authority under American oversight. Roads, bridges, and public buildings were constructed, connecting islands and improving trade and communication. Schools were built, and English became the language of instruction, promoting literacy and civic education. The curriculum emphasized democratic ideals, obedience to law, and loyalty to the new government. Yet this modernization came at a cost. Traditional Filipino social structures, customs, and political systems were often suppressed or marginalized. Local leaders were required to operate within the frameworks set by American administrators, limiting self-determination. Many Filipinos resented the presence of foreign authority, leading to continued resistance in rural areas, even after official hostilities ended in 1902. Daily life during this period was shaped by both opportunity and tension. Some Filipinos benefited from modern schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects. Farmers gained access to new agricultural techniques and markets, while towns developed commerce and trade under American systems. Yet others faced restrictions, forced labor, and taxation, illustrating the complex nature of colonial rule. The war's legacy left deep psychological scars, as communities grappled with loss, displacement, and the tension between adaptation and resistance. Emilio Aguinaldo's leadership remained a symbol of Filipino nationalism. Though captured in 1901 and forced to pledge allegiance to the United States, his struggle inspired generations who continued to seek independence. American influence endured in legal systems, education, and governance, yet Filipino identity persisted, blending new ideas with traditional culture. By the time the Philippines gained independence in 1946, the islands had undergone dramatic transformation. Roads, schools, and governance structures remained, but so did the memory of conflict and the desire for true self-determination. The Philippine experience illustrates the dual nature of colonialism, modernization and development on one hand, and suppression of local autonomy and cultural traditions on the other. Understanding the Philippine story provides insight into the challenges of overseas empire. It highlights the human cost of conquest, the resilience of people under foreign rule, and the tension between ideals of progress and the realities of occupation. This period set the stage for the Philippines' enduring relationship with the United States, a relationship defined by cooperation, influence, and the continuing legacy of history. Puerto Rico, a Spanish colony for centuries, was ceded to the United States in 1898 following the Spanish-American War. For the island's residents, this transfer of power brought profound changes, opportunities, and uncertainties. Although Puerto Ricans gained U.S. citizenship in 1917 under the Jones-Shafferoth Act, they did not receive full political representation. Residents could vote in local elections and for a non-voting delegate in the U.S. Congress, but they could not vote for the president, highlighting a contradiction at the heart of American democracy: citizenship without equal rights. Economically, Puerto Rico experienced a significant transformation under American administration. Large U.S. corporations invested heavily in sugar plantations, coffee production, and agriculture, reshaping the island's economy. These developments brought jobs and infrastructure, but also led to social tensions. Land that had once belonged to local farmers was often bought or taken over by large corporations. Smallholders struggled to compete with industrial-scale plantations, creating economic inequality and social unrest. Labor strikes, protests, and political activism became common as Puerto Ricans voiced frustration with unfair wages and working conditions. Cultural life also changed under American influence. Schools were reformed with English language instruction alongside Spanish, emphasizing American civic ideals, history, and values. Local traditions and festivals persisted, but the younger generation increasingly grew up with a blend of American and Puerto Rican culture. This created a unique hybrid identity, where loyalty to the United States existed alongside a strong sense of Puerto Rican nationalism. Despite modernization and economic growth, political autonomy remained limited. The U.S. government maintained control over the island's budget, trade policies, and judicial system.
We must
Local
secure the
politicians
Caribbean
could
and
manage
establish
some
a strong
domestic
naval
affairs,
presence across
but critical
the Pacific.
decisions
Control of
were
these raw
ultimately
material
overseen
markets
by
is
the
essential
American
for our
appointed
growth.
governor
Indeed,
and federal
the
authorities.
markets in the East.
This arrangement caused frustration among Puerto Ricans, fueling debates over the island's political status, whether to pursue statehood, independence, or enhanced Commonwealth status, a debate that continues to this day. Life for ordinary Puerto Ricans was shaped by adaptation and resilience. Families balanced traditional ways of life with new economic opportunities. Children attended schools that introduced new ideas and English language skills, while adults navigated changing agricultural practices, employment opportunities, and civic responsibilities. Local communities maintained cultural traditions, music, and festivals, finding ways to preserve identity under foreign governance. The story of Puerto Rico under U.S. rule illustrates the complexities of colonial citizenship. Residents were citizens, but without equal political rights. They experienced economic development, but also inequality. They benefited from modern education, yet faced cultural transformation and external control. This duality shaped Puerto Rican society, identity, and politics for generations. Understanding Puerto Rico's experience provides insight into the broader challenges of American overseas expansion. It highlights the tension between ideals of democracy and the realities of empire. Even today, Puerto Rico's status reflects the lasting consequences of this period, reminding us that colonial legacies continue to influence governance, identity, and social life. Long after the initial transfer of power, Guam, a small island in the Western Pacific, quickly became a critical military and strategic outpost following the Spanish-American War. Its location made it a vital stop for naval operations, trade routes, and American influence in Asia. For the local Chamorro population, life changed dramatically under U.S. administration. New schools, infrastructure, and governance systems were introduced. But traditional ways of life were disrupted, creating a complex dynamic between modernization and cultural preservation. The outbreak of World War II brought unimaginable challenges to Guam. In December 1941, just days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces invaded the island. The occupation lasted nearly 3 years, during which civilians endured forced labor, strict rationing, displacement, and severe restrictions on their daily lives. Families were torn apart, homes were destroyed, and communities struggled to survive under harsh conditions. Stories from survivors recount fear, resilience, and courage as people found ways to support one another despite the occupation. Liberation came in 1944, when U.S. forces retook the island, restoring American administration and providing relief to the war-torn population. The experience left deep psychological and cultural scars, but also reinforced Guam's strategic importance to the United States. Today, the island hosts major military installations, serving as a forward base for operations in the Pacific, and symbolizing the ongoing strategic significance of small islands in global geopolitics. Other Pacific islands also played vital roles during World War II. Wake Island, though small, was fiercely defended in 1941, becoming a symbol of resistance. Midway Atoll was the site of the pivotal Battle of Midway in 1942, where U.S. naval forces defeated the Japanese fleet, marking a turning point in the Pacific theater. These islands, though remote and sparsely populated, proved critical in determining control of the Pacific and protecting supply routes, showcasing the immense strategic value of even the tiniest landmasses. Following the war, the United States administered other territories, including the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, and Palau, under United Nations trusteeships. These administrations aimed to guide local populations towards self-governance and eventual independence, while simultaneously maintaining American influence in military and economic affairs. In these islands, education, infrastructure, and governance reforms introduced by the U.S. blended with local traditions, creating unique hybrid societies that balanced autonomy and American oversight. The story of Guam and the Pacific Islands illustrates how geography, war, and strategic interests shape human lives. Residents experienced both hardship and opportunity under American administration, while the United States strengthened its global military presence. These islands became critical outposts, influencing the outcome of major conflicts and the post-war balance of power in the Pacific region. Across all U.S. territories, the expansion of American influence brought profound disruption to local populations. In the Philippines, centuries-old social and political structures were transformed almost overnight. Village leaders were often replaced or subordinated to American officials, while the introduction of new legal codes and administrative systems reshaped local governance. Families were displaced by military campaigns or development projects, and traditional ways of resolving conflicts gave way to foreign judicial systems. In Puerto Rico, the imposition of American economic models altered daily life. Agricultural practices shifted to meet commercial demands, particularly in sugar and coffee production. Small farmers struggled to compete with large plantations owned by American companies, creating economic inequality. Meanwhile, local governance changed under American oversight, limiting political autonomy and fostering frustration among residents who had previously enjoyed greater self-determination. Even in Guam and other Pacific islands, ordinary people faced both opportunity and hardship. Schools and infrastructure improved under American administration, yet wartime occupations, forced labor, and new laws disrupted long-standing cultural practices. Children learned English and American civic values, while adults adapted to new economic systems and military regulations. Communities worked hard to preserve their cultural heritage, organizing festivals, teaching native languages, and passing down traditions amidst sweeping changes. Resistance and activism were common responses to foreign rule. In the Philippines, armed uprisings, guerrilla warfare, and local protests reflected the desire for independence and self-determination. In Puerto Rico, strikes, political movements, and debates over statehood or autonomy voiced the population's frustrations. Across territories, ordinary citizens demonstrated resilience, adapting to new systems, protecting their families, and finding ways to assert identity and dignity under foreign control. Daily life during these transformations was a delicate balance of adaptation and tension. Children attended new schools and learned unfamiliar languages and customs. Adults navigated shifting economic opportunities, trade restrictions, and imposed governance structures. Yet even under foreign control, communities found ways to preserve culture, maintain social networks, and foster hope for the future. These lived experiences illustrate the human side of empire. Political ambitions and treaties intersect with real lives, shaping identity, opportunity, and resilience for generations. The human cost of empire was not measured solely in numbers or policies. It was felt in homes, villages, and schools. It was present in the fear and courage of civilians caught in conflict, in the sacrifices of families supporting the war effort, and in the ongoing struggle to balance adaptation with cultural preservation. By understanding this human dimension, we gain a more complete view of the consequences of colonial expansion. Beyond maps, treaties, or political rhetoric, across America's overseas territories, culture, economy, and governance became intertwined tools of influence. Education was one of the most powerful instruments. Schools built by the United States taught English, civic responsibility, and democratic principles. Students learned about U.S. history, government, and law, often at the expense of local languages and traditions. While these reforms improved literacy and introduced new ideas, they also reshaped cultural identity, creating hybrid generations that blended local heritage with American influence. Governance systems were similarly transformative. In Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, local councils and administrative structures were reorganized under American oversight. Legal codes were introduced, elections restructured, and bureaucratic systems established. These changes created new opportunities for participation and social mobility. But they also limited political autonomy, highlighting the tension between modernization and self-determination. Economically, territories became vital sources of markets, raw materials, and strategic ports. Puerto Rico's sugar plantations fed U.S. industries. The Philippines provided agricultural and mineral resources, and Guam offered a crucial military foothold in the Pacific. Local economies were transformed to meet us needs, introducing new trade networks, transportation systems, and commercial practices. For ordinary people, this often meant new jobs and opportunities, but also challenges in adapting to large-scale economic shifts and foreign-controlled industries. Cultural resilience persisted despite these changes. Local festivals, music, cuisine, and religious traditions continued, often blending with new American practices to create hybrid identities. Filipino, Puerto Rican, and Chamorro communities maintained languages, customs, and social networks, while simultaneously adapting to American systems of education, governance, and commerce. This fusion of cultures reflects the enduring ability of societies to preserve identity under foreign influence. The legacy of American colonial expansion continues to shape politics, society, and international relations. Debates over Puerto Rico's political status remain unresolved, balancing questions of statehood, independence, and autonomy. Guam's strategic military importance continues, providing a forward base for U.S. operations in Asia and the Pacific. The Philippines retains close diplomatic, economic, and cultural ties with the United States, influenced by decades of American education, governance, and investment. These outcomes demonstrate that empire is not just a historical event. It has long-lasting effects on identity, politics, and society. The experiences of colonized peoples, shaped by education, economy, and governance illustrates how influence can persist for generations. The United States' overseas territories remind us that colonialism leaves a complex legacy, one that intertwines development, adaptation, and cultural transformation. Understanding this legacy helps explain modern challenges and opportunities in these territories, as well as the ongoing relationships between the United States and its former colonies. The story of culture, economy, and governance shows how empire reaches beyond politics, leaving a deep imprint on people's lives, societies, and identities across time. America's journey from a collection of colonies to a global power was neither straightforward nor simple. It was shaped by wars, diplomacy, economic ambition, and the actions of both leaders and ordinary people. The Philippine-American War illustrated the harsh realities of conquest and governance, as Filipinos resisted foreign rule while Americans sought to assert control. In the Pacific during World War II, islands like Guam, Wake, and Midway demonstrated the strategic importance of seemingly small territories, while the sacrifices of local populations revealed the human cost of empire. In Puerto Rico, debates over citizenship, rights, and political representation highlighted the challenges of integrating a territory into a nation founded on principles of democracy. Resistance movements, protests, and activism in all these regions reveal a common theme: the tension between foreign control and the desire for self-determination. These events show that power, even when justified in the name of progress or protection, often comes with moral and political complexities. Even a nation founded on the ideals of liberty can become entangled in contradictions when pursuing global influence. Expansion brought economic growth, strategic advantage, and cultural exchange. But it also led to displacement, inequality, and cultural tension. By examining these historical episodes, we gain insight into contemporary challenges, debates over Puerto Rico's status, Guam's strategic role, and America's ongoing relationships with former territories. Understanding this history illuminates how past actions shape present circumstances, reminding us that power and responsibility must be balanced carefully, and that the human experiences behind political decisions matter deeply. The story of America's colonial expansion is a complex tale of ambition, resilience, and contradiction. From the early days of independence to the acquisition of territories across the Pacific and the Caribbean, the United States transformed from a fledgling nation into a global power. Wars, diplomacy, and economic pursuits shaped the nation's reach, while the lives of ordinary people, soldiers, civilians, educators, and laborers revealed the human consequences of empire. Throughout these expansions, one theme stands out: the tension between liberty and control. The United States, founded on ideals of freedom and self-determination, extended authority over distant lands where local populations had their own histories, cultures, and political aspirations. In the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Guam, and other territories, governance, education, and economic systems introduced by the United States both modernized societies and limited self-rule. Local traditions persisted, yet the influence of American culture, law, and language left an enduring imprint. The hybrid identities that emerged in these territories highlight the adaptability and resilience of human societies. Filipinos blended American civic practices with local culture. Puerto Ricans negotiated citizenship alongside autonomy, and Chamorros adapted to life under foreign rule while maintaining their heritage. These experiences remind us that empire is not just about political control. It reshapes culture, community, and identity in ways that lasts for generations. At the same time, the expansion of the United States underscores the moral complexities of power. Wars and conflicts were waged in the name of national interest, yet they often involve profound human suffering. Resistance movements, protests, and uprisings revealed the persistence of agency among colonized peoples, showing that empire is never absolute. History teaches that the ambitions of nations must be balanced with responsibility, empathy, and an awareness of the consequences of power. Today, the legacies of these actions are visible worldwide. Puerto Rico debates its political status, Guam serves as a strategic military hub, and the Philippines maintains deep economic, cultural, and political ties with the United States. These enduring connections remind us that history is not simply a record of the past, it actively shapes the present and future. Understanding this legacy allows us to engage thoughtfully with questions of governance, identity, and international relations, ensuring that lessons from the past inform contemporary choices. Ultimately, the story of American expansion is not only a narrative of conquest or empire, it is also a story of people navigating change, preserving culture, and striving for dignity and self-determination. By studying these histories, we gain insight into the complexities of power, the resilience of human societies, and the enduring impact of decisions made across oceans and continents. The United States' journey from a nation of 13 colonies to a global power reminds us that ambition and ideals, progress and hardship, freedom and control are forever intertwined in the story of empire.